Okay. Yeah. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the War Room. This one is for Khamzat Chimaev against Gerald Meerschaert. Obviously, we're doing this one because the hype around Khamzat Chimaev at the moment is it's exciting. It's warranted because the man's terrifying, and he's effectively playing out two careers in two weight classes at the same time. And that is a storyline going into this one, which I think is interesting. It's not the first time that a fighter's been double booked. It's the second, and now the other one is Veronica. Actually, she was double booked, and she was the first fighter to be double booked. He is the second fighter to be double booked, but the story going into this one is so much more interesting because obviously Khamzat Chimaev is a natural welterweight. His next fight is at middleweight, much like his UFC debut was at middleweight, and he doesn't care. He'll fight anybody, any weight class, just send location. He's not bothered. The reality is he's so much closer to the top of the division at welterweight because of the skills that he's got and the tools that he has and the size that he is, which is why his second matchup that he's got is Demian Maia. If you get a win over Demian Maia, you don't get easy fights after that. You beat Demian Maia. So you're right up in the mix at welterweight. So this next fight is at middleweight. He's fighting a guy that's a great grappler. He's had 44 fights, I believe, lots of submissions, 20-odd submissions on his record. He's taking on a guy that's not natural to his weight class, that has already booked to face someone that has the same kind of game as him. Obviously, Demian Maia's grappling skills compared to everybody else are of a higher level. But the fact that Gerald Meerschaert's a big, strong individual that likes to strike, that is a powerful kicker as a southpaw, that also is an excellent spoiler, I like the fact that he's annoyed. He's pissed off the fact that he's been double booked. He's the first fight for Khamzat in two fights that have been booked. I mean, if I'm Gerald Meerschaert, my sole intention in this fight is to stop Khamzat making it to that next fight. Even if I don't win the fight, I want to do enough damage so I'm not overlooked like that in the future. Because that's insulting if you're a fighter. He's going to walk through you and then he's going to take on the next guy. That's how I'm interpreting that if I'm the fighter. That's how Meerschaert will interpret it, should interpret it. If he does interpret it like that, I think there are benefits to it. If I look down Meerschaert's record, if I remember what I've seen of Meerschaert in the past, there are certain fights that stick out in my head, particularly the Jack Hermansson fight. I mean, even the Trevin Giles fight. Meerschaert is almost tailor-made for Khamzat. He's tailor-made for Khamzat to do what Khamzat does best, which is take you down, control you on the floor while he's just mauling you from every position, and wait to see what you give him to finish the fight. In the last two fights we've seen him, I mean, what is it? It's 100 and something strikes he's thrown and two received in two UFC outings, two weight classes. The thing is with both of those guys, John Phillips is a power puncher with decent takedown defense. Reese McKee is a precision striker with a good ground game. Neither of them had the wrestling to contend with Khamzat and what he was able to do. I also say the same thing goes for Gerald Meerschaert. I don't think he has the wrestling to deal with Khamzat. But what Meerschaert has, he's durable. He's got a good ground game. He's got a variety of different submissions that he can use. He's also good at taking a beating and being taken right to the brink of defeat and then turning it around. If I focus on the Trevin Giles fight, as you watch this fight play out, you find yourself doing the same thing as I will, and the same thing that the commentators will. Well, what? He keeps giving up position. He let him take him down. He let him pass his guard. He let him take mount. Then he sweeps him. Then he lets himself get swept. It's almost like he wasn't particularly engaged because he wasn't particularly threatened. Because Trevin Giles wasn't doing a great deal to hurt him on the floor. The difference with the Hermansson fight is Jack Hermansson was doing the same thing that Trevin Giles was doing, but he was punishing him at every opportunity. Hitting him, controlling him, moving around him so he's attacking from the blind side all the time and making it very uncomfortable for Meerschaert. If you allow it to be comfortable, he'll play his jiu-jitsu game. He'll play his guard game. He'll roll around. He'll switch positions. He'll give positions. Given the fact that Khamzat has been booked a second time, and given the fact that Khamzat is excellent at beating you up when you give him positions on the floor, I'm hoping that Meerschaert gets into this fight with an intensity like we've not seen before. If he comes into this fight refusing the takedown, if he doesn't allow Khamzat to progress positions without some resistance, and if he doesn't allow himself to get beaten up until his opponent gets tired, then I think we're going to see a more aggressive version of Meerschaert. And when we've seen Meerschaert be aggressive, he is dangerous. Like, he's a long-range southpaw with a really good body kick, but he'll also engage in the striking range. If he can discourage Khamzat taking him down, if he can threaten immediately when they get to the floor, or at least scramble a couple of times to force Khamzat to work, he might be able to encourage a striking game. And then we don't really know what we're going to see from Khamzat because we've not seen him really throw anything on the feet. What I will say is, I mean, obviously we saw that footage recently of him catching Gustafsson and dropping him in training, and obviously that's an internal video that's come from the gym. We don't know who was videoing it, why it was put out, etc., etc. What I do know is that Khamzat is trained by Andreas Michael, who is an excellent, well, I would say striking coach. He's an excellent MMA coach with a striking specific mentality. And I think if you've got someone like Khamzat who's got the wrestling that he has, is able to control people on the ground, if you just keep adding striking skills to that, you just make him more dangerous every time he steps in there. And I think what they have with Meerschaert, if I'm in the All-Stars training camp and I'm looking at Meerschaert with a fighter like Khamzat, I'm like, just do the same thing that you normally do. Because he's going to let you move around him on the floor, and he's going to let you ground and pound and control his wrists. And this is what Khamzat does so well. The challenge I feel in this fight is if Meerschaert's able to take the ground game off the table a little bit and force it into a striking match. Because then those powerful body kicks from Meerschaert, the range that he's got, the ability to perhaps, pepper Khamzat on his way in and threaten the neck when he's level changing, it might push Meerschaert into this fight a bit more. There's no doubt he's got the skills to win these fights. I would say, looking at his record, he's got the skills to beat all the guys he's lost to. Sometimes he just doesn't show up. And I don't know whether that is down to who he's fighting or whether that's down to his personal psychological issues when he's getting in to compete. I have to think, though, the fact that he's A, fighting Khamzat, and B, Khamzat being double booked, is going to make Meerschaert a little more aggressive, a little more... I mean, he's going to be annoyed. He's going to be pissed off. Meerschaert, you should be pissed off for this. I mean, that's the reality of it. This guy's been double booked. You're being overlooked. You need to fight like you're being overlooked. And we don't see that very often from him. Let's get into Khamzat because... the reason that I want to animate some of his footage is because of the things that he does so well. We know what we get from Meerschaert. We know he scrambles. We know he's got a good ground game. We know he can threaten from various different positions. We also know that the downsides to his game, his ability to be bullied on the floor, his ability to be a little bit complacent is probably the best word, allowing people to progress when they shouldn't. With Khamzat, you just can't allow that to happen. Now, the get-go of the John Phillips fight, the first opening of the John Phillips fight is important because he knew exactly what he was doing. Right. Let me just pause this right where it is. Okay, the first round's just started. Now, Khamzat's come out, and I'm going to tell you right now that his corner team is looking at him from that direction there. And the reason I know this is because the way Khamzat tweaks this kick and alters his footwork to force his opponents back to his own corner. He wants John Phillips on the floor in front of Andreas Michael and Reza Madadi, getting all that good feedback right in his corner. So watch what he does here. He's going to throw a kick, and that kick is going to circle John Phillips over in this direction. Kick, John Phillips moves, and then it squares his stance up. So look at that. The thing is, if you're fighting John Phillips, I mean, his nickname before he got to the UFC, I'm not sure whether he still uses this. His nickname before he got to the UFC was the White Mike Tyson. I mean, he's a puncher. He leaps off his feet to land power punches. So as soon as he sees you moving into his range, his preset is to punch you in the face because most of the time when it lands, people don't get up. So as Khamzat starts to move here, you can guarantee John Phillips is coming over the top with that big power punch. And there it is. But at the same time as him coming over the top, look where his legs are. He has squared his feet up for Khamzat to attack directly. I mean, it's a good play from Khamzat, but it's something that I feel was discussed in the dressing rooms before. Okay, come out, throw the body kick, and then drive him straight into the fence. Because what follows this is a power double leg, He sits John Phillips on the floor, and then he intentionally bumps him over. So John Phillips overhooks here. So John Phillips has got control of this arm. He's doing the same thing on the opposite side. This makes it a bit easier for Khamzat because it means that his opponent's now clamped onto him. Khamzat doesn't have to pick him up and move him. He only has to move himself with John Phillips attached. So what he does here is he moves himself over to the fence, over to the corner. Look how he just keeps bumping him up, picking him. He's moving him to the corner post where his corner team are. So now he's got him folded up against the fence. Look at the curve in John Phillips' spine. And then his legs go up. I mean, that is such an uncomfortable position to be in. Because you've got to then pick a side. You've got to go, do I want to drop this way or do I want to drop this way? And whichever way you go, Khamzat is going to work to that side. He's going to control your wrists, and he's going to start ground and pounding you. So from this position here, what we see is Khamzat just starting to work. He's trying to encourage John Phillips to go a particular way. And he's allowing John Phillips to make that decision, but pressure alone forces Phillips to this direction. Keeps him folded up against the fence, makes it very uncomfortable for him. And I also like the fact that he's not really allowing John Phillips to comfortably lay to one side. He's still trying to keep him cramped up. This is a good angle here. He's still trying to keep quite square to the fence. If you look at that's where his knees are. He's keeping John Phillips cramped up against the fence, but because you can see that angle there, you can see it slightly wider on this side for John Phillips than it is here, which is going to encourage him to move in that direction because that's where he feels like there's the most space. But also you've got Khamzat's corner team here. We've got Razad there and Andreas Michael here, both yelling instructions over at their fighter that's right in front of them, ready to receive that information. So as this plays out, and a fair play to John Phillips for taking this beating like he did, but it was just a working over. See, that space was created there for Khamzat. That space was created there for John Phillips to move. See, Khamzat's stacking him here. Khamzat's got weight, so John Phillips is being forced to use this leg to keep Khamzat off him. And as soon as Khamzat gives him the opportunity, as soon as he releases that pressure, see, John Phillips kicks him away. Khamzat goes to a knee, and then John Phillips' legs are free, and he starts to scramble. But as soon as that's happened, Khamzat has already decided he's moving around this direction because he knows which way John Phillips is going to go. He has control with this hand here. So John Phillips can't go the opposite way. There's two ways out of this, and he has to go in the direction that Khamzat's offering him, which is why as he goes, he brings his feet to the fence and he turtles. Bang, and then he's up against the fence. And look how quickly Khamzat follows his hips in, pins his hips to the fence. So now John Phillips now is not only feeling like he's trying to get up against the fence, but he's now feeling like Khamzat's right on top of him. All of his body weight is on top of him. He's got a toe on the floor, he's got a foot on the floor. But if you take John Phillips away, Khamzat lands on his face. That tells you how much body weight is going into John Phillips in that moment. And we saw this in his second fight as well. I'm going to get into his second fight in a moment. But it was this consistent control. The grips around the back, the handcuff on the far wrist, and the wrist control that we see from Khamzat all these strikes, they're low power strikes. But it's making John Phillips work. It's making him work on Khamzat's terms. He does the same thing that Khabib does. He hits you to the point where you start to escape, and then he controls you. Then you settle in the control, and he starts to hit you again. And when you get sick of getting hit, then you start to try and escape, and then Khamzat switches back to control. It's this beautiful coupling of these two facets of attack. You attack until you've got to control, and then you control until they've accepted, and then you go back to attack. And John Phillips, he trains at SPGs. He's dealing with a lot of guys that are on his back all the time because John Phillips is a power puncher. Guys want him on the floor because they don't want to deal with those heavy hands that he's got. But like this wrist control here that we're seeing, there's nothing for John Phillips there to get himself out of that because Khamzat is dragging him back to the floor here. Let me just play this on. John Phillips is just stuck in this position. He's really got no options. And Khamzat just slowly works him over, stays behind him again. Same position as we've seen before. He's trying to get a near side hook in, but he's keeping his whole body weight on him. Like if we go back to there, look at that. I'm just going to skip it back a tiny bit more. Look how much contact Khamzat has with the floor here. We've got that foot and that foot. I don't even think his knee on the far side is in contact with the floor, really. I think his body weight is on John Phillips. So not only you're getting peppered, but you're also getting worn out as well. It's a very, very exhausting game plan. And this is why Khamzat took no punches. This is why he was able to get that quick turnaround a week later, because he's not taking any damage. I mean, we know so little about his game because this is all we've really seen of it. You know, his previous fights were, he was fighting for Brave, and they're very difficult to get a hold of, those fights. But this constant work rate here is very, very impressive. And it continues on throughout this fight, throughout this round, and into the next one. I mean, it's peppering. But you see what I mean? Every time he looks to escape, he finds himself under attack, and then he finds himself dealing with control grips and pressure that Khamzat is just making him work the whole time. I mean, you can start to see here John Phillips is really starting to give up. He's settled on his knees. Look at this is a good signifier. If your foot's flat against the floor like that, that's not an athletic position. That's not a position that you can spring back to your feet quickly. Because before anything, Phillips has got to lift the weight off his heel so he can get his toes to the floor. That's his athletic position. Ricky Lundell, when I was wrestling, he always used to call it active toes. That's not an athletic position. That flat leg across the floor there, that's an accepting of the fact that there's someone on your back controlling you. So, I mean, the thing is, if you're fighting Khamzat, it's like, which poison do you deal with first? He's always going to be trying to control you until you've accepted that control, and then he's going to start hitting you and beating you up. Let's just skip through to this next round, because John Phillips, I mean, poor guy, he gets back to his corner. I think we get a shot of Khamzat in his corner here, having a jolly good time. You can see how much fatigue and damage is on the face of John Phillips, and he's having a good time. He's having a lovely time. And that is one of the scariest things you'll ever see. A fighter in his UFC debut after his first round, he's taken no punches and he's got a big smile on his face. And he's coming into the next round with a guy that's already worn out, already beaten up, and already feels like there's no way of getting into this fight. There's not even an exchange in this first round. And this is, again, Khamzat with a beautiful double leg, and he tweaks it slightly because John Phillips, instead of thinking about attacking now, is thinking about defense, because he's got that whole first round in his mind. So watch how fast he switches to defense when Khamzat level changes here. And he does meet him pretty well with this take there. He does meet him fairly well. He manages to get his hips back. As Khamzat goes down, look, you see John Phillips' arm drops. This arm's going to drop here to try and scoop an underhook here. He's going to try and forklift him. He's going to try and get that underhook so he can lift him back to his feet. As it progresses through, look, he gets the underhook down, but Khamzat's already inside. Nice and direct, straight to the thigh, hooked around the leg. So now John Phillips is trying to get his hips away from Khamzat as much as possible. He's trying to get in this direction. He's trying to get his feet away from him as much as possible, because that's how Khamzat's going to have to start chasing and start to trying to draw him in. But what Khamzat has here, let me get rid of all this junk on the screen. What Khamzat has here is this and this. And if you're driving straight forward, you've got to somehow pull those legs to your body to finish that takedown. If you're smart about it and you can pick one side and you've got a good pivot, this is what happens. Watch how Khamzat collapses, changes his angle, and twists him to one side. So instead of now driving through, he's now not trying to drive through his opponent. He hits that resistance, he stops, he's settled on this knee here, and he's going to pivot and he's going to take him the opposite direction. Drive. And look at that leg of John Phillips. That right leg, you can see the hook on the back of his knee. That's what's stopping John Phillips defending this takedown. And even when he gets this hand to the floor here, it's still not enough of a base to stop Khamzat ironing him out. Bang, and he's already over him. And then he's on the floor. And Khamzat does the same thing again. He chases him to the fence where he's got a better controlling position. Where are we? This is John Phillips trying to get away here. Chase him to the fence, and then you're back in Khamzat's world. You're in the same position here 30 seconds into the second round as you were in the first round. Same thing happens again. It's just a control position, and it's wrist control. It's breaking down framework that John Phillips is trying to build up. I mean, it's just a beautiful, beautiful performance from Khamzat, and he cruised through this fight, and immediately afterwards he's like, yep, ready for next week, bring it on. And the next person, look at that beautiful neon stomach there. Short shots here. I mean, John Phillips gave everything he's good. And trust me, John Phillips is a tough individual. Right, let's just go through this finish here. Right, so pressure. Think about this. So you've been working now for 6 minutes. You're tired, you've been beaten up. now you've got someone driving their whole body weight into your midsection. Like all of Khamzat's weight at the moment is going through that knee there. Ooh, there we go. All of it is going through that knee there. All that body weight is driving in. So not only is John Phillips now trying to move, but he's also trying to breathe with pressure to his midsection. His diaphragm's not got the room to work. And that also cuts off John Phillips's opportunity to turn away from him. He has to turn into him. If he turns away, he's going to pull Khamzat onto him and basically going to find Khamzat on his back. So what he does is he turns into him, and this then sets Khamzat up. See how he wraps around here? That's his first line of vulnerability. He wraps that. Khamzat's going to come inside that. Look at that. And now that's the arm that becomes a part of that choke. That underhook reaching in. See, you can just about see it here. That mess just there on the front of... Why is this jumping around? That mess on the front of John Phillips' face there. That's Khamzat's hand and glove, clawing his face back into a position that he doesn't want it to be. So John Phillips is forcing against that. He's driving from this direction into Khamzat, trying to get to his knees. But as he starts to drop back, Khamzat's going to slide that arm. Look at that. That arm slides underneath there. It continues to slide. And now you can see it's bent under his arm. So now he's trying to get his hands together to meet. And as this progresses, he gets a clamp on. So now both his hands together. And now he's putting torque on the back of John Phillips's head. So that is the left forearm pressuring down onto John Phillips's head and the right arm lifting up to encourage him to go back onto his side, which he does. So what you're going to see here is this arm. This is difficult to draw from this angle. The right arm of Khamzat is coming up in this direction, and the left forearm, which is across John Phillips's head, is forcing down. So he's twisting him over onto his side. He's creating torque in his midsection, which John Phillips just doesn't want to deal with on his neck. Look at where his head is. Pressure from the forearm on the back, and then the bumping over with the right shoulder puts John Phillips right on his side. And then there's no space. John Phillips knows what's coming. He knows that there's a choke here, but Khamzat circles around, keeps that pressure on, and then slowly adjusts this position. Look at that. Really nice. Now he's dropping that. So the difference here, there's still pressure. We can just about to see. So that just there is Khamzat's elbow. There's still pressure on the back of John Phillips's head in this position. So as then Khamzat brings this leg through and sits into, it's almost a reverse scarf hold position. As he sits through, that doubles the pressure on the back of John Phillips's head. And then the natural thing to do is for John Phillips to start scooting the opposite direction, get his legs away. That's why you see people you chase the circle. You have to chase that circle as quickly as you can. Unfortunately for John Phillips, he has fence behind him, and he knows that limit's there. But at the same time, Khamzat is immediately going to hook over the body there just to stop that. So as he's driving into him, all that pressure is going into John Phillips's neck. He's also already tired. He's also gasping for air, struggling to breathe, already feels like he's been beaten up. The whole of the first round was taken away from him. He just had no option there. There was no option to escape. Right, I'm going to go into the other fight. I'm going to have to record this one separately. Right, okay. This is his second fight in the UFC. This is against Rhys McKee. Like I said before, Rhys McKee, he's a good counter striker. He's got good long range strike, and he's got good ground game as well. Better on his back, I would say, than on top position, purely because of the submissions that he has in his arsenal. This was a very unfortunate UFC debut because you're fighting someone that is just... he's ahead of his game, is what we're realising with Khamzat. He's so ahead of his game that even as this fight was happening, I was already in commentary talking about him fighting Kamaru Usman, because I can see comparable skills in what he's got compared to what we're seeing at the top of the game. This is just like what Khabib does to people. So look at this takedown here. Right, he gets the body lock, and same thing again. He's running into his corner. Here's his corner look. This is Reza, and this is Andreas Michael in his corner. He knows where they are. He's looking at them. He wants them in his ear so he can be coached through these positions. But he lifts Rhys McKee up here, and McKee's doing a good job of trying to stifle this by hooking the legs. But as they get closer to the fence, what Khamzat does is he basically shelves him. He puts him on his thigh. Look at this. Lifts him up, clears that first leg, because Rhys McKee's hooking on this leg. Look, you can see that little hook there is causing Khamzat a few issues. So he kicks the leg free and then goes behind the opposite leg and takes that one away. And now Rhys McKee is effectively sitting on his knee. There's not much he can do because there's nothing to base him going this direction. Nothing to stop him. Khamzat literally just needs to twist with his body weight and drag him down, which is exactly what he does. And as he lands, look at the hand that gets planted. That is fish food for a shark, because Khamzat's going to grab that and he's going to take control of that wrist, and there it is, and he's going to pull it out, and then he's going to plant that shoulder on the floor. Now, he's tied up. The only way he can turn is into the fence there, and he's already being limited in that movement. And this handcuff position that we see Khabib use so well as many of the other wrestlers that like ground and pound against the fence, he constantly goes back to this grip. Here it is again. Grip on that wrist. Frustrating, slows people down, forces people to pick the lesser of two evils. But because Khamzat's choosing which evil you're turning into, he's prepared to make that evil as nasty as possible. Again with the wrist control here, look. Wrist control against Rhys McKee. That stays there. And he only lets go of it because he wants Rhys McKee to move. Because he's trying to get something to finish him. So he switches his grip. Rhys goes back to the floor. I mean, it's literally a clinic. He literally just works him over. This is where in the Meerschaert fight it becomes problematic, because Meerschaert allows these positions to happen, or at least in the past he has. If he allows these positions to happen against Khamzat, he's losing the fight until he wins it. And that's been the same with a lot of Meerschaert's fight. He's losing the fight until he wins it. If he starts doing that with Khamzat, he's going to allow Khamzat to put a lot of money in the bank, start to do damage, start to threaten with submissions, but also start to see the escape routes that Meerschaert uses. So this is one of the reasons why I feel like Meerschaert does it, is because he likes to see what your tendencies are when he gives you positions and you want to attack, because then he turns your attacks against you. But unfortunately, in this circumstance, Khamzat's just not going to chase submissions over strikes. He's always going to work to beat you up. I very much felt like this fight, he just didn't need to beat Rhys McKee up as much as he did John Phillips. He knew that he could be physically imposing because it's a different weight class. See, this is welterweight, and that's the difference. If he's fighting a welterweight, I think he might be more physically imposing and trying to chase the submission. Whereas against a middleweight, he's just going to soften them up. He's going to decrease that amount of strength that he's dealing with by beating them up in the process. And he's going to find an opportunity to get the finish. And it's I mean, I always celebrate this about Gunnar Nelson. Gunnar Nelson doesn't strike you in positions where you're vulnerable. He strikes you in positions to make you more vulnerable for the next position. Against Zach Cummins, he was on his back. He was slapping him in the stomach to bring Zach Cummins' arms down so he can attack the neck. If you're dealing with someone that's just wailing on you, it's easier to find those escape routes. If you're finding someone that's strategically beating you up to force you to do things, that's when you have to then anticipate what they're trying to do as well as deal with what they're currently doing. And that is layers and layers of things that you have to be contemplating when you're also in these horrible positions. Like Rhys McKee now has got one arm being completely controlled by Khamzat here. He's trying to defend with the other one, but at the same time, both of his legs are being extended behind him. There's literally nothing he can do in this position aside from keep moving to show that the referee that he wants to stay in this fight. But it just gets to a stage where, I mean, he's like, you're stuck and overwhelmed in these positions. Rich Mitchell's having a good look here because there's nothing else Rhys McKee can do to improve his position. Every route out of this bad position that he's tried, he's been punished and put back in that position. The excitement of him going into the fight against Meerschaert is the fact that Meerschaert can take a beating for 2 rounds and still sub you in the third. Also because Meerschaert he's got a physical strength to employ his ground game. We know he's got the ground skills to find facets and weaknesses in his opponent's game. We haven't seen anybody expose any weaknesses in Khamzat's game yet, which is why I want to see him against some good grapplers. I don't necessarily know that Gerald Meerschaert's that guy unless he shows up with a different mentality. Okay, we're just going to replay here. Lovely takedown, shelves him, drags him over that lead leg, and then goes straight onto that wrist control. And then here, you can see Rhys McKee's trying to defend with this arm, but it's not doing anything, and he can't pull this one any closer to him because Khamzat's controlling that around his back. I mean, I just love watching these positions. I love watching control to ground and pound because it illustrates a presence of mind that is not focused entirely on control. It's control to win the fight. It's control to strike. It's control to submit. It's not control to control and win. He's intentionally trying to get these fights finished. He has an intention to damage and to hurt and to finish. And with Meerschaert, he's going to be given these positions if Meerschaert shows up like he normally does. We need Meerschaert to show up aggressive. We need him to show up like he's annoyed that he's been double booked. If he shows up with an intensity to prove a point and to not be overlooked, absolutely he can cause problems for Khamzat. But at the same time, if he fights like he normally does, he might just be another statistic on Khamzat's record, and he might not be able to get off any strikes. The best facet of Meerschaert's game in this fight is to threaten when it hits the floor, is to defend takedowns best he can, and then force Khamzat to strike, because that is the one area of his game that we've not seen him deal with yet. And if we look at Meerschaert against some of his other opponents, particularly Eric Spicely, particularly Deron Wynn, we saw good body kicks, we saw good striking. If he can get into that rhythm where he's confident he can strike and Khamzat's not going to keep trying to take him down, we might see a real upset here. We might see a real problem. And then do you see Khamzat progress on to fight Damian Maia, or does he get booked with somebody else? That's the big question here. That's what's hanging over Khamzat's head. And as much as it's exciting for him to get double booked, he's not going into this fight like it is the first and last priority on his mind. It's one of the two priorities that he's got. This might sound a bit stupid. When I used to go into fights, I used to return anything I'd borrowed and clear all my debts, because I needed to make that walk to the octagon like it was the last 15 to 25 minutes of my life. If I didn't get into the octagon with that mentality, I was always saving something for tomorrow. And I don't ever want to save anything for tomorrow, because it's life or death. It's war. You're getting in there to beat somebody or be beaten. And just because the referee's there to stop you getting killed, it doesn't mean that's not the result of losing a fight. Because if you think from a martial arts mentality, it's warfare. It's a martial way. It's about surviving. And if you're put in a position where you're going to get beaten up to lose a fight, you're losing. That's the war's over. There isn't a rematch. And this is the mentality that he has to approach. Like, he can't go into this one thinking Meerschaert, then Damian Maia. Or maybe even be excited because he's got Damian Maia. Because I would be more excited to fight Damian Maia than Meerschaert if I'm him, because Damian Maia is a much bigger name. He's going to get him much further ahead in the rankings. Maybe this is the UFC challenging Khamzat. See if he can stay focused on the current target and not overlook it in comparison to what's in the future for him. The truth is, we're all excited about Khamzat. That's why we're doing this show for you guys, because we've seen what he's capable of against the first two opponents that he's faced. We just don't know where his limitations are. I'm excited to see him continue to progress, and I think that if he gets a good win over Meerschaert, it solidifies him in the middleweight division, as well as a potential win over Damian Maia, which puts him right in the top sort of 5 or 10 at welterweight. He's a very exciting prospect and a very dangerous individual. But Meerschaert, I'm not underestimating you, my friend, because I certainly know that if you show up on your game with your skills, you can also beat this man. This is a fun one. Enjoy this fight. See you next time.